Welcome to the Chillness Room. This is episode 24. I want to speak a little bit about conditioning. So, there's a Zen story where a lion cub is kind of on this farm with a bunch of sheep, right? And he doesn't know that he's a lion. He's been made to kind of wear sheep's clothing in a way. He's been somewhat bound to kind of grow up believing that he is also a sheep. And so, really, no closing thoughts about that. you know, you can make up your own story. You can say, oh, well, the lion realized he was not a sheep and then he ate all of the sheep. if you want to go that route, which is perfectly fine. Or that he found himself and then he was able to, or he stayed sheep forever and ever. I'm not talking about this for any like broader political or anything like that. I'm not talking about that. Why I'm even mentioning this is that often we are trained to believe we're like the people around us. And the question is why? Why would people want us to be like them? And that's an excellent question because being like the people that you are around, that you come up with, that you are in your community, being like everyone else is safe. Okay, so why is it safe? Well, no one questions you. Nobody tries to make you different. You're already like them. So there's no conflict. There's no judgment. There's no fear. There's nothing happening really when you're just like everyone else and you are essentially towing the line. You aren't questioning anything, and they aren't questioning anything. When we start to question why, and this happens usually earlier in age, we want to know why everything is happening because we want to understand our place. We want to understand what things are like because at an innate level, we do want to feel safe. So the questions get answered and they get answered relatively quickly. Well, why are we only turning left? Why do we never turn right? You why is the sky blue? Why is it, why is it that we do things this way as a group, as a community? And if the answers seem to appease the initial question, then what naturally happens is we stop questioning. We just go, oh, okay, well, that's fine. That's an answer. And it closes the loop for the consciousness. And then that same activity or that same thing can get played out exactly the way it's intended to by that particular group or community or what have you. The problem with all of this is that we now have things that connect us to worlds outside of our communities. So now when we ask a question, we may ask the leader of that community or someone that we feel would be in the know about how that community works. I'm not talking about anything like cultish. I'm just talking about regular people living regular lives, okay? And so they go to the one in charge, right? And say, well, we all do it this way. But I noticed that these people over here do it that way. To even consider that other people do something differently than what we do it and become curious about it is actually not common, right? Because depending upon how deeply enmeshed you are in that particular situation or community, You may look at somebody else's way of doing something and go, that's wrong, and completely shut off the possibility that somebody else is doing something differently. How could that benefit you? Or how could the way that they're doing it feel better to you? Or maybe that makes way more sense to you the way that they're doing it because you've been a lion underneath the coat of the sheep for too long. And you recognize suddenly, wait a minute, I don't belong over here. I actually belong there because I feel more of a connection, a knowing. I feel more at ease in that space. I feel more balanced. I feel more at home. I feel more loved. I feel more connection. That doesn't mean you eat all the sheep. It doesn't mean you necessarily leave the community you're in, or you shun them, or act in ways in which they would shun you. But you just recognize it and then you keep moving forward. I remember when I first started my personal healing journey, my life had always been, it's this way. And any kind of thing that I would do outside of that would be like, just to be a little bit more obstinate. I'd be like, yeah, let's study some white witchcraft and really get under people's skin, that kind of thing. But what I actually was doing there was trying to figure out who I was, where I fit, why what I was experiencing didn't fit, and that the questions that I would ask just weren't good enough answers for me. So I had also experienced a tremendous amount of pain, emotional pain, mental pain, physical pain at the hands of people that were a part of that community. And I was like, well, how can I possibly belong here? This isn't who I am. This isn't what I want. If I'm going to be abused in this space, there's got to be a better space for me. So I became curious and I followed my feelings. I followed what felt right to me. And when I met someone who would eventually become my mentor, I noticed how different I felt around her. I felt like myself. I felt like, oh, she's a lion, I'm a lion. I know that. I know it now. And then when I would go back with the sheep, and this could be any kind of, I know there's a lot of connotation around those types of animals, but if I went to the original space that I came from, let's call them sheep. It doesn't mean that they're bad or less than or victims or needing to be victimized or any of that kind of stuff. That when I went back to that space, I could tell how much everybody wanted me to put my sheep's clothing back on and how much I was simply not willing to. I was simply not willing to. Now, there were a few people in my community, my originating community, where I was like, they're not going to understand what's going on. And I do care about them and I don't want them to be afraid, right? I don't want them to be worried for me. So maybe I would be a little bit more in my sheep's clothing for a little while until I could feel more at ease, even just knowing myself more deeply, so that I could present as who I truly was, so that they would not be afraid. So there's two sides of it, right? There are the sheep that'll be afraid for you to go off and be your lion self. And there is the fear of not being loved and accepted by the people that you came from. And that did keep you safe and did love you and did care for you for all those years in a variety of ways. So, metaphors aside, let's just get to the truth of the matter. When we look at conditioning, that's all that is all the things that I just described, is that we are conditioned into a mental and emotional and physical space that keeps us with the intention of being safe. It keeps us in a lane. And that as long as we stay in that lane, no harm will come to us, right? It doesn't mean the people in your community don't want you to be successful or grow or do great things. They kind of just don't want to be left out of it sometimes. Sometimes they believe you'll fail and that'll hurt you. And if you're hurting, that'll hurt them. And so it seems selfish, but it's actually it's intended with love. And so understanding that, if you can understand it and get clear about it for yourself, and just know I'm going to be who I am anyway. And they'll come to the place where they can accept me exactly as that is, or they don't have to. And it doesn't mean I'm unlovable, and it doesn't mean they're unlovable. That instead we just part ways in an amicable way. Sometimes it doesn't happen like that, and it has to be some big fight for them to come to terms with what's happening. And that then they can overlay the blame onto you. And they can say, well, he's acting crazy, or she's acting crazy, or they're trying to do this thing, or they're whatever it might be. And then whatever judgment that they might have. And then when we're sitting there with that, as our lion selves, and saying, wow, okay, that doesn't feel good, But I also know that there are often times where there are some people in that community that they're also wearing sheep's clothing. And they really belong to the giraffe family, or they really belong to the dolphin family, or they really belong, to the elephant family, right? And so they actually don't really belong, but we come into this physical world and we say, wow, this is what is going to keep me alive until it's time for me to move on or to stay, and to recognize that I'm going to embody my sheep self. I love that part of who I am. I love being that. There's so much beauty in that, right? So the main thing is, how do we determine, number one, if we've been conditioned to just see things one way? I think we talk about othering, right? When we look at a community outside of our own, and then we other them. They're the other people. They're the other ones. When we other people, Ram Dass talked about this a lot. When we other people, we can diminish them in our minds. We can make them wrong in our minds because we're not considering that all of us are one. We're not all one sheep, and maybe not all one lion or elephant or whatever. We are all one in energy, in beingness, in wholeness, in truth, right? We're all one. And so this dynamic that happens, that the safety piece of why we condition, is to keep our communities intact, keep them growing, keep them being productive, keep them moving forward, keep them procreating, all that kind of stuff, to help with the overall species of the world. But the dynamic that happens with othering is a very much an egotistical kind of thing, but it also creates fear and it creates separation, even though we are all one, right? So if they, the others, those other elephants over there, those lions over there, we believe that they are going to hurt us or attack us, or because the way they do it is different than the way that we do it based on our conditioning, then we've lost something really beautiful. We've lost the ability to learn. to grow, to gain new information, to gain new insights. And so we know that that's all true. How do we all know that's true? The reason why we know that's true is because we put pepper on our eggs. We put turmeric in our egg salad. Okay. That's hilarious to me. That's so wild to come up with that. That's going to be the next book title I have, Turmeric on Your Eggs. So because we have those things, the reason why we do is because there was exploration. There was going outside of the community that was established in order to go, wait a minute, this isn't all there is. There's something else out there. The way in which it happened, all of the colonization garbage, again, that has to do with fear. I'm going to bring my way of thinking to the other, and then the other will do what I want them to do. That's a different level of egotistic horror, okay? But for the most part, if we look at it from just a generic 30,000 foot view, it's again that space of going, I know that there's more to life than this. And the conditioning would say, don't get on that boat. Don't leave this community. Don't move forward in another direction away from us. Unless it was positioned properly. I believe if I get on this boat, I'm going to find more land. I'm going to find more opportunities. I'm going to find gold. I'm going to find, something that's a resource or something that I can bring back to my community. And then I will be exalted. I'll be tops. Like my grandmother used to say, top drawer. Top drawer, darling. So then that's an ego push. What I'm really talking about is breaking out of the conditioning that says, I know that there's something different in me. I've come to the realization, whether I've seen it in someone else and I recognize it as truth for myself, but don't quite know how to express it, or it's just something that I know. I feel it, I sense it. There's something different about me than everyone else. I just don't fit. There's more to this life for me, and I don't know what it is. Now, that doesn't mean there's less for other people. That's a thing that our brain also goes into. It says, well, oh, more for you. Oh, yeah. I guess that means we're just chopped liver. You're not. That other community, not the other community, but the community you came from, isn't less than you. It is exactly perfect the way that it is. And that its intention and how it's grown and how it's developed over the years is absolutely perfect. So, to kind of recap here, we've got where suddenly you realize there's something different about you, and you have been conditioned all this life to believe one thing or another as gospel. You start to notice that there's something different, and there are others who feel more in alignment with you. And that alignment essentially feels even safer than the environment that you grew up in. It might feel more loved, it might feel more balanced, it might feel more accepting, it might feel more whole, or it might just feel different and that feels good to you. It does not mean that you reject where you came from initially. That's not what that means. Where it tends to get hairy is when that originating community gets scared for you, because they have also been conditioned into that same world over and over and over again themselves. We also talked about the others and othering people. instead of recognizing that we're all one. We're all just different facets of one, a jewel having many sides and reflecting many purposes. For me, a successful life is making sure that I have broken out of as much conditioning as I possibly could to see who I truly am so that I can fully return into any situation, any group, any friendship, any family dynamic, any experience, fully me, fully present as myself. And I'll be honest, I'm not there. I'm not there yet. I'm not even 100% sure exactly who I am yet. I do well enough, right? I get through the day. I have enough wherewithal to be able to speak to these types of things easily. I've talked to lots and lots and lots of people, and it's not like I can't move within certain situations, but that doesn't necessarily mean I'm fully integrated. And that could take quite a long time. Right now, it's good enough. I at least know that I have taken the steps to release the majority of the conditioning that I've experienced in my life. I know I'm a lion, but there are times when it is really comfortable being a sheep. It's so nice and nostalgic to go, I don't have to go be a lion right now. It's nice because then you have a choice, because sometimes we just want to be home, whatever that was for you growing up. And sometimes we know that home was not where you were meant to stay. So, in many ways, this time is an offering of permission to recognize yourself, recognize who you really are, and say, you know what? I love my sheep life. I love everyone in my sheep life. And I've noticed that there are some lions over there that seem very, very interesting to me. No big choices, no heavy swings, just letting yourself become curious. And with that, I will leave you, my loves. I hope you have a beautiful day and take care.